Hey everybody, Steve Burns here is now to talk about how to customize the Wacom pen for those who may be a lighter handed touch and those who may be a little bit more of a heavier handed touch. Let's give a different brush here that we can use to see the brush results much better. On your options bar right up here, go to the second icon over, or while you're inside of your brush tool here, once that's activated, I can use the bottom click of my pen, let the pen or the stylus hover half an inch above your tab, click and release on your bottom click, and you're going to get the exact same thing. I think this is a lot easier. Now, you want to see the results of your brushes in terms of a stroke, what they're going to look like when you actually make a stroke. By default, you don't get that. So what we're going to do is go to your top, there's a gear symbol here, click it down. By default, you're going to see small thumbnails, but what you're going to select instead are your stroke thumbnails. Target that, and there we are. Now we can see each brush as if we're stroking it out utilizing our Wacom stylus. So there's a square brush here. I'm going to come right over here, and I'm going to grab one of these little square-like brushes. I'm going to target it. And those brushes have particular properties added to them. Now I'm going to go into the properties settings. It's going to be your first exposure to it to learn how to get various effects utilizing a particular brush that you're going to save. Once I've selected that, I can just click anywhere on the desktop and I can see the shape of my brush. Remember, the top click on your button, we set it for making your brush bigger and smaller. Be aware that whenever you make a custom brush, you do not get the red overlay. We only get the red overlay with the standard circular brush. That is an Adobe fault. That is something they have not yet figured out how to program into Photoshop so that we can actually see the shapes and the quality of the shape as an overlay. It's not there yet. Now, if I start to paint, I'm going to hit the D key as in default on my keyboard, which changes my foreground and background color to black on the top and white on the bottom by default, which means I'm always pulling from the top color so I can start to draw and paint and so forth. I'm going to set the pen back to now this one is set with pressure sensitivity already applied. I'm going to turn it off so you can see what it looks like when it's not applied. There we go. It's just a solid stroke and a square brush. And I'm going to hit and click delete. And the reason why I made a second layer with the merging ants around it, so that I can delete the contents within the layer without deleting the layer itself. All right. Now let's go set the pressure sensitivity. The third icon from the left hand side on your options bar is going to be your properties panel. So if I target that, right over here is my brush presets, but it also gives me various properties for that particular brush. Currently nothing is set. What I want to do is I want to change the opacity of this brush utilizing my 2048 levels of pressure sensitivity. So if that's the case, then I'm going to come down here and target transfer. Once transfer has been targeted, I'm going to come right over here where it says opacity and flow. And you can also see opacity and flow at the top. I'm going to make sure those two are set to 100% for both. And I'm going to tell the program to make sure I'm using normal blend mode, because that particular brush that I chose had some blend modes applied to it by default from Adobe. But I want everything set to normal. I want opacity and flow 100%, and the only thing I want to change is the pen pressure for both opacity and flow, or I can drop it down and we have other options in here: fade, pen pressure, pen tilt, and so forth. So making sure pen pressure is set for transfer, and you can see right down here in the bottom the actual visual of what you're going to get. Now here's something else that's very important. Once you create new properties for a brush, you must save it. If you don't save it, you will lose those settings. Now go to the top menu here, sub menu, top right hand corner, new brush preset, and call it what you want. I'm going to just leave it there by default and click OK. Where did it actually save that? Let me go ahead and close this out for now. Right click. It's the very last brush, always the very last brush, so you can always find it. Now let's go test it out. I'm going to press light, a little harder, a little harder, even a little harder, even harder, and just see how well or how many gradations I can get out of this brush. Now that we have the brush the sensitivity set, I'm going to hit the delete key to delete this. I'm going to want to actually control that 2048 levels of pressure sensitivity to be compatible with how I like to draw and paint, with the amount of pressure that I like to put down as a unique artist when I actually utilize these levels of pressure sensitivity. Alright, so as I just showed you, I'm just kind of drawing up and down and slowly pushing the pen down harder and harder as I go across to kind of give me an idea of how many gradations I can use with this default sensitivity. Alright, so let's go back to our Welcome Properties panel. And here is where we set that. We're going to make sure Photoshop is targeted and the grip pen is targeted. With those two activated, it's going to give us the pen, eraser, and tablet. Remember, I can actually select these individually, but you want to make sure pen is targeted. By default, we have it's right dead set in the middle. Let's bring it all the way over to soft and let's see what's going to happen. Okay, let's go click anywhere in Photoshop. It automatically applies it on the fly. Now watch, I'm going to press very, very light like I did before. Very, very light. And then just go slightly. You can see how quickly it just goes dark. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our Welcome Properties. Now we know what it was like to. Let's go a little bit underneath the middle. Let's see what that does. And I'm gonna go very light. Yeah, it's a little darker, and a little darker, and a little darker, and a little darker. Okay, that's still fading off quickly, but much better than the one before. All right, let's go back and find our Welcome Properties, and this time let's take it over to something like past the middle, closer to firm. Now this is the way I find it. Depends on what I'm doing that I like to work, depending on what I'm doing once again. And I'm going to go ahead and go light and light, a little harder, a little harder, a little harder. You see how I'm getting much more control? A little harder and a little harder, a lot more control there. Okay, so you have to decide what works best for you. Although I like to use Photoshop to test out that pressure pen sensitivity fill, there's another way to do it as well. Right under the tip fill, you have the Customize button. I'm going to target the Customize, and you can actually customize it by testing it out here. So if I press down harder, you see the stroke gets thicker, and very light, it gets thinner. It allows you to feel, how these particular settings are being applied. Now, if I want to adjust them, I can just pull this curve on over and draw again and see. Now this one's a little bit more responsive. I can control the thin lines and very gradually go to the top. I'm going to go do it again from the top. Slow, gradual, that pressure down. So I'm having to put a little more pressure. Now if I pull it up to, this is closer, this is normal. This is default. So if I click and drag it, it doesn't take much pressure to apply the thicker stroke. If I go upward here, you can see that I hardly have any control. And even if I go very light with the pen, it's very difficult to give it that the very light stroke or the thinner stroke. So if I go slightly below normal, then it's giving me a little more pressure I have to apply to actually create the thicker stroke. So play with this. This can help out as well. Then when you click OK, it actually sets it for you. It sets it internally. Alright, so I closed out the Customize panel, and you can also test it this way as well. You see right here we have a current pressure. So if I tap down light, it's showing you exactly where it stands. You press down harder, you can see the graduation of the various levels of pressure sensitivity being applied. Now what about tilt sensitivity? So tilt is when you actually, with the pen actually placed in the center, you're tilting the back end from left to right or forward or back or so forth. So you're going to get a certain effect when you're tilting. So if I actually bring the tilt over, it's going to give me a certain amount of control with how sensitive the tilt's going to be. Now let me actually show you a practical application of applying tilt. We're going to utilize the same brush. Go right over here to the third icon once again, back to our properties here. And under the shape dynamics, in this particular case, we have the options for angle right there. That is where you apply your tilt. Under the controls, what do we want to use for it? We want to use pin tilt. And you can see right here we're getting a little bit of a different effect. That means as I tilt the pin, you can actually see the brush. Looks like it's rotating, but it's tilting. So I tilt the back of the pin away from the monitor, tilt it a little bit more back toward me, or actually to my right side. You can see it, point downward, pointed toward me. You can see the starting to point more toward to the right, giving more of the flatter edge. So with practice, you can draw and paint controlling that tilt. Now to give you a little better example, let's go ahead and delete these. Let's take this pen, let's make it a little bit smaller. I'm gonna hold down the shift key so I can restrict it to one level. Hit the M key for the marquee tool. Why? Because when we make a custom brush, this selection is going to determine where the center is going to be. There it is. Go to Edit menu, define that brush preset. There it is. Call it what you will. I'm going to click OK. Go back to B for the brush, and there it is. There's your brush. Command or Control A to get your full selection so we can delete that one. Remember, we can resize that brush. And then we start to draw and paint. There is our new brush. Now let's apply our pin tilt to this. Once we have a new brush, your settings are back to default. Click on the word Shape Dynamics. And this is important, not just a checkbox, but on the word Shape Dynamics. Under the angle, go to your controls, target the what? Pin tilt. And you see, I can tilt that pin. So play around with this. I think you're going to find it very handy. In fact, let me show you. Go to your very first icon here, brush tip shape. What that's going to do is allow you to give you more spacing or less spacing. I'm going to pull the spacing apart here. Now I can see. Now you can see the effects of the tilt. All right, so explore those possibilities. Play with that. Let's change what this brush can do. Okay, so far we have the tilt on here. Let's go over here. Let's turn the tilt capabilities to off. So we're working with this standard linear brush. Now let's go over here to the size options. What if we want to adjust the size based on its pin sensitivity pressure? So there it is, pin pressure, targeted. Look what we have here. Press light, harder, gets thicker, harder, gets even thicker. Nice, isn't it? So what this does, it gives you something similar to a brush that will apply calligraphy. No, press harder and softer. Now let's go over here to brush tip shape. Let's pull it closer together so we have a much more of a solid line, and then let's even apply it even more all the way over, and there it is. A little bit more solid. Now once again, even while we have the pressure sensitivity based on the shape or the size of the brush, 2048 levels of pressure sensitivity will give you your various sizes in here. I can also apply tilt to this. So if I go over to my shape dynamics once again, pin pressure here for the size. Let's go over here to the angle. Let's apply the pin tilt. You can see here we're getting different types of effects. Okay, all right, really fun stuff. So play around with this and come up with some things that that's going to do some pretty give you some pretty unique, exciting effects. Let's jump down to scattering now. Let's go ahead and delete that there. Let's turn off the shape dynamics and turn on the scattering by clicking on the word scattering, which will also give me my options here. I'm going to go over to my shape dynamics. Let's give it a little spacing here so you see a little bit better what the effects that we're going to accomplish. And if I just paint now, I'm getting that one shape, linear shape. What I would like to do is control the scattering. So if I pull this over, look what's happening. You can see right down here what's going to happen. Now, if I go ahead and paint, we start to scatter. Now I can tighten up the scatter by bringing the slider to the left or actually spread it out more. You see it's really going across the canvas. Okay. Let's go ahead and delete that. Pull the scattering closer together so I have a little bit more of a control. Now we can scatter in both axes, okay? So the X and the Y. So it's a little bit more unpredictable. Now we can decide the count. So when we spit them out of the nozzle, do we want a greater amount and see what's happening here? We get a greater amount coming out at one time. Or I count jitter, which means alter the amount of the count over the length of the stroke. Okay, and I can also do, now there's your scattering, jitter. That simply means, jitter simply means alter that particular option over the length of the stroke. Especially when you come back up to shape dynamics, you have size jitter, simply means alter the size over the length of the stroke. Now look at what's happened here. So now we get something a little bit different. It's kind of really, really fun. I can go to the size jitter and alter the size. Look at that. Right down here, look at this. I get a different effect. So we're going to alter the size as I rotate the pen. Really fun stuff. So a lot of things can come of this. If I can also, now pen pressure, so I'm pressing light, all right, smaller and bigger. Okay, now let's go back down to scattering. In fact, let's go ahead and go over to jump down toward color dynamics. This one's actually quite fun. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn these two off so we can see the color by itself. Let's change the foreground and background color. Let's go ahead and target this, make this a red. Let's target the background and make it something like a green. There. Okay. Now, if I paint, let's pull this right over here, it'll be easier to see. If I paint, I'm going to get the foreground color. I can also alter the color per stroke. Make sure apply per tip. It should say per stroke, but it says per tip. Pull it on over here, and you can see the two colors are being alternated. Pull it over even more, it becomes alternated a little bit more strongly, closer to its purity of the color. Okay. Now, what I want to do is, say for example, I want to make highlights in a car, or maybe highlights in a character's hair, where I want one portion of the hair to be brown, the other portion to kind of go kind of purplish. So what I'll do is I'm going to make one color, let's say more of a brownish. Another color, I'm going to give it that magenta purplish look. Okay, let's go ahead and clear our canvas. Now, if I apply jitter, it's going to alternate the color over the length of the stroke. I don't want to do that actually. What I want to do is apply it, go to my control, and apply it on pen pressure. Okay. So if I press light, I get one color. I press harder, I get another color. See that? Pretty fun. Light and harder. Light pressure, harder pressure. Now, go to my brush tip shape, pull the spacing really tight. So if I press light, harder, 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 and light again. Okay. So it's going to be, what you're going to do is going to play with all types of combinations between your various dynamics and your brush tip shape. to adjust spacing and so forth. Okay, now what we can do next is apply transfer, which is applying my pen pressure for both opacity and flow. The same thing as opacity and flow here, but we're telling it to override, tell this to override the values that are here. So if I press light, harder, harder, and lighter again. Okay, so it should give you some ideas. Now let me share with you the some other options, like the brush pose and so forth. And over here in the shape dynamics, we have a brush projection. Okay, let's go ahead and clear our canvas. Right click, bottom click on my walking pen while it's hovering above my pad. Let's go and get that the last one of the last one, that square brush that we had here. So if I draw, I have the pressure sensitivity on. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right up here to shape dynamics, and again it's still the same, but what we have here is brush projection. This is cool. If I click it, see that change shape a little bit? Watch what happens. I'm going to tilt my pen and look at the brush tilt and shape and stretch. Let's make it a little bigger so you can see what's happening. So I'm going to let the pen tilt all at the back end of my pen. The eraser side of my pen is tilted all the way down toward the right. Now it's tilted straight up, so it's completely perpendicular to my screen. Then I'm going to tilt the back end of the eraser all the way to the left side, which is pushing my brush shape, or distorting the brush shape over toward the right. And I'm kind of rotating the brush and moving it up toward the right, or the top right, top bottom, rotating it around. You're getting different shapes. So now you can play with that idea of altering your shape of your brush while you're painting. I think that's kind of another cool little feature. Brush pose, if we click on that, does something similar. Okay, and just play around with these. We have rotation options. We can override certain features. Play around with those and see what you're getting. So now I'm tilting the brush to the extreme. As you can see, it's not really tilting as extreme as it used to be, or it's not distorting as extreme according to these settings. So play around with this, and you can override tilt and x-axis, override tilt and y-axis. All right, so if I click this, we're going to get something a little different, or it's going to override that. You can see it's kind of stuck there now because this is overriding all features. So once again, play around with that, see what you can come up with, and to get some more interesting and more dynamic results.